Joining me now is former Trump National Security Advisor John Bolton. Ambassador, thank you so much for being with us. This is our first chance to talk to you since a lot of this new information has come out. There are Trump insiders who say there was a standing order to declassify information that the president took from the Oval Office. You were National Security Advisor for what, 17 months? What was your knowledge of any standing order?
There was no standing order. I was not briefed on anything like that. When I started as National Security Advisor, I never heard of it, never saw it in operation, never knew anything about it. The president never said anything to me during 17 months there. I just think it's a complete fiction. Look, the president said he had to take classified materials to his residence, and therefore he declassified them by doing that. Look, nobody's worried about unauthorized people in the residence quarters at the White House. If there are unauthorized people there, we've got a problem a lot more serious than documents being compromised. Moreover, if this existed, there had to be some way to memorialize it. The White House counsel had to write it down. Otherwise, how would people throughout the government know what to declassify? You don't declassify a document just as to Donald Trump. If a document's declassified, it's declassified. And no such record-keeping system existed. And I think this is just a sign of how worried the president's advisors are about the nature of the problem he's in right now.
A fiction, you called it.
Yeah, look, if he has declassified hundreds, maybe thousands of documents that he took to the residence because he worked very hard on this at night, as we all know, over 4 years, the media should be filing Freedom of Information Act requests for all documents declassified by Donald Trump pursuant to this standing order. I'd love to see what gets produced.
And we know from seeing the receipt of items taken from Mar-a-Lago that there was a box labeled as SCI, sensitive compartmented information. Can you think of any reason that a former president would have to have sensitive compartmented information in his residence?
No, look, in a normal administration, a president is quite likely to write memoirs. He'll want and deserves access to highly classified information. Arrangements are made for former presidents and indeed for former cabinet officers who leave under happy circumstances, that SCIFs are set up that they can go to and look at this classified information. I don't think there's any explanation that carries any weight whatever why Trump just didn't follow the normal procedures, except he thought he wasn't subjected to procedures.
We've now seen this Department of Justice response in a filing to an effort by media organizations to get a hold of this affidavit that led to the search of Mar-a-Lago. And in this Department of Justice response fighting it, they say that there is highly classified material in the affidavit. They also say disclosure of the government's affidavit at this stage would also likely chill future cooperation by witnesses whose assistance may be sought as this investigation progresses, as well as in other high-profile investigations. You've worked on sort of both sides of this, Ambassador, inside the Department of Justice and also inside the security world. How do you read this filing?
Well, I think it says there are very significant problems here for President Trump and many of his advisors post-presidency. But I think we've got to distinguish between the legal battle that's going on and the political battle. I think the Justice Department position sounds perfectly reasonable on the legal battle, but on the political battle, I think they're being overwhelmed by Donald Trump. You know, if we were in a Coliseum with two gladiators, one of them Donald Trump, the other Merrick Garland, we'd be about to witness the slaughter of the lambs. The Justice Department understandably wants to follow its normal procedures. It's facing an adversary who couldn't care less about the normal procedures. And I do think the department's got to do more here. I know it's hard, but they're still not doing enough to explain why this search warrant was executed and why now they don't want to release the affidavit. Last night, for example, when they filed their motion, they should have put somebody on camera at the Department of Justice reading from it. They should have tweeted it. They should have sent it to every member of Congress. I'm not asking them to say more than what they've said in their court filing, but they've got to do more to explain what they're up to, and they've got to think of creative ways to justify it to a very skeptical public in many respects.
So you're saying better PR, but are you saying that they should release the affidavit, parts of the affidavit, or let members of Congress see some of the classified material? What's your view on that?
Look, the argument is that you can't even release a redacted version of the affidavit because most of it would be redacted. I'm not surprised by that. I don't know what the documents are. I don't know what sensitive sources they've spoken to. I'm just saying that you've got to be more realistic about the political environment that they're operating under. And I would say this. I think this is something, if President Biden thinks this is a legitimate investigation, he needs to say something. Other politicians need to weigh in. Otherwise, to pick a Watergate metaphor, right now, the Department of Justice is twisting slowly, slowly in the wind. It is a target for Donald Trump, and it's not being defended.
In your book, you refer to former New York City Mayor Rudy Giuliani as a swamp creature. And I don't think you meant that as a term of endearment. And Fiona Hill testified of Rudy Giuliani. You said that he is a hand grenade that is going to blow everything up. That was in relation to the situation with the call to Ukraine. Ambassador, how surprised are you to see the former New York City mayor now as a target of an investigation in Georgia?
Well, I have to say, I'm very saddened by this. I'm saddened that this has happened to Rudy Giuliani, and I think it's going to happen to other people. But it tells me that that President Trump may be right behind him in terms of liability. If Rudy's in trouble as the target of an investigation, then I think Trump almost certainly is as well.
I do want to ask you about Iran, if I can, for a second here. On Friday, author Salman Rushdie stabbed. He's recovering, thankfully, this morning, but with life-changing injuries. Iran has denied any responsibility for the stabbing attack on Friday, but in some ways has celebrated it. You were the target of an Iranian assassination operation. There was money offered to kill you. What does this say about Iran and how it operates today, its sense of impunity, and where it is on the world stage?
Well, I think that's the critical question when we come to a range of issues, including Iran's general support for international terrorism, but most importantly, its pursuit of nuclear weapons. The Biden administration, like following the Holy Grail, has made concessions for the last 17 months to worm its way back into this deal, which was a bad deal to begin with. This is a regime that for which commitments mean absolutely nothing. They're prepared to make a lot of commitments to break free of the economic sanctions that have been imposed since the U.S. withdrew from the deal, and to get back money that's been frozen. They're not going to slow their nuclear program down in the slightest. And I think really when Congress comes back after Labor Day, people need to tell the administration, you are pursuing a dangerous path for the United States. These assassination plots against Masih Alinejad, Iranian-American human rights advocate in New York, against Salman Rushdie, not just against me, but against former Secretary of Defense Mark Esper, former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, and many other people, show the Iranians think they can proceed with impunity. And until we demonstrate to the contrary, I think a lot more people will be vulnerable as well.
Ambassador John Bolton, we appreciate you being with us this morning. Thank you for your time, sir.